Sole, when I gave you your vocabulary sheets to look at for this stage, I showed you that there was something new in the verb form, that rather than just having two forms, now there are three forms. I said to hold off on that thing in the middle, and we'll get to it. Now it's the time to get to it. So this is what your verb forms look like now. Notice that there are three things. The first and the last are somewhat familiar to us, even though they're in the I form now rather than the he, she, it form. But this thing in the middle is something special. It's called an infinitive. An infinitive is the action of a verb in its most basic form. It's not tied to a person, it's just the action. I'll give you some examples. Cantare just means to sing. It's the action of singing. Retenere means to keep. Dicere, to speak. Advenire, to arrive. Notice that when we translate them into English, we often use the word to sing, to keep, to speak, to arrive. Notice too that Latin infinitives often end in these two letters, re. There are some weird ones though. Hang on to those weird infinitives. We'll get back to them in a moment. Do you remember back in Latin 1 when we looked at nouns, people, places, and things, and we grouped them into three families based on the endings that they shared? We called those families declensions. Well, it turns out that we can do the exact same thing with verbs. Verbs can be grouped into families called conjugations based on shared characteristics. Specifically, we're looking at the vowel that precedes that RE marker of an infinitive. We can identify the first conjugation by that long A before the RE. We can identify the second by the long E. We can identify the third by the short E, and the fourth by a long I. It's really nice. These are mostly in alphabetical order. You just need to remember that long E comes before a short E. Not only do verbs share characteristics in the infinitives that we can group them into, but it turns out that every verb in a conjugation also conjugates in a similar fashion. First conjugation, we'll use the example cantare, to sing. Canto, cantas, cantat, cantamus, cantatas, cantant. I sing, you sing, he sings, we sing, y'all sing, they sing. Notice that in the first conjugation, that A vowel that we saw before the RE shows up in most of the verb forms here. Second conjugation, retineo, retines, retinet, retinemos, retinetis, retinent. I keep, you keep, he keeps, etc., etc. Notice also in the second that the E that came before the RE shows up in the verb forms as we conjugate them. Take a look at the third and the fourth. Dico, dicus, dicit, dicamus, dicatus, dicunt. The third is not our friend. The short E is a weak E, and the weak E runs away. Fourth conjugation, advenio, advenis, advenit, advenimus, advenitus, adveniunt. Again, you can see the I that came before the RE shows up in this verb form. The infinitive has lots of uses, but we're primarily going to use it in one way. And we're going to use it to complete an idea of another verb. In fact, I just used it in a sentence. We're going to use it to complete an idea from another verb. When an infinitive completes an idea like that, we call it a complementary infinitive, not because it says nice things about the verb, but because it completes the idea of the verb. For instance, I have to do my homework. Without the to do in there, I have my homework. Well, that's true, but it completes an idea that it is necessary for me to do it. You are able to learn these forms. Without that infinitive in there, you are able these forms, it doesn't make sense. So it completes the idea of what you are able to do. Let's look at some Latin examples. Saluius canem videre vult. Salvius wants to see the dog. Servi laborare nolunt. The slaves do not want to work. Volubilis legere potest. Volubilis can read. Volubilis is able to read. Necesseas tibi audire. It's necessary for you to hear or to listen. There are certain verbs that almost always take an infinitive in order to complete themselves, and they are these verbs in here. Posse, to be able, velle, to want, and nolle, to want. And you might recognize these because these are those weird infinitives that I said to hang on to for a moment. That's right. These weird verbs with weird infinitives require an infinitive in order to complete their idea. These things are called irregular verbs because they don't fit into any of our four categories. They don't have an RE and they don't have a vowel that we can identify them of a conjugation, and so they are irregular. And don't just think that they're irregular because they're infinitives. Let's go ahead and take a look at all of the forms conjugated out, and you can see what's going on here. We'll start with to be able. Possum, potest, potest, possumus, potestis, possunt. I am able, you are able, he, she, it is able. We are able, y'all are able, they are able. That's pretty crazy. Sometimes it has a T, sometimes it has an S. Let's get with something even weirder, the verb to want. Wolo, wis, wolt, wolamus, woltus, wolunt. I want, you want, he, she, it wants. We want, y'all want, they want. It's even weirder. Sometimes it has an I, sometimes it has an O, sometimes it has a U. You ready for something even weirder? To not want. Nolo, non-vis, non-volt, nolimus, non-voltus, nolunt. I do not want, you do not want, he, she, it does not want, we do not want, y'all do not want, they do not want. Sometimes it's one word, sometimes it's two words. It's pretty crazy. These are irregulars. There's no set pattern like in a normal verb, but we do have irregulars in English. Consider the verb to be. I am, you are, he, she, it is. Most languages have irregular verbs, and most of those irregular verbs are really commonly used. And it's because they're commonly used that they become irregular. It's pretty wild. So notice that we can translate the verb possum posse, to be able, we can translate that as can. Nos dormire non possumus. We are not able to sleep, or perhaps better said, we can't sleep. Likewise, nolo, nale can be translated as to refuse rather than to not want. So, puer consumere non vult. The boy does not want to eat. We could say the boy refuses to eat. It's really context. It's all context. Context is king in this class. I'll leave you with some examples from the book. Pilus numerare potest. Pilus is able to count. Pilus can count. Numerare is our infinitive, has that RE, and the A before the RE indicates that it belongs to the first conjugation. Pilus can count. Volubilis canem optimum cocere potest. Volubilis can cook the best food. Cocere is the infinitive. I recognize the RE. And the short E before the RE indicates that it belongs to the third conjugation. Bregens dormire vult. Bregens wants to sleep. Dormire belongs to the fourth conjugation because I recognize that long I before the RE. Voila.